My name is Richard Lawson, and at 73 years old, I discovered something that completely shattered the way I understood my marriage. For 41 years, I believed my wife and I were partners. Not perfect partners, but honest ones. The kind of couple who survived hard times together, raised children together, built a life together, made decisions together. At least, that's what I thought. Then one rainy November afternoon, 6 months after my wife died, I opened a locked file cabinet in her office and discovered she had secretly transferred millions of dollars to our son over nearly 12 years. Millions. Hidden. Quietly. Carefully. While repeatedly telling our daughter there wasn't enough money to help her. Before I tell you how my wife's secret financial favoritism nearly destroyed our family after her death, make sure to subscribe. Because this story taught me something devastating. Sometimes betrayal doesn't arrive through lies alone. Sometimes it arrives through unequal love disguised as protection. My wife Eleanor and I met in college during the early 70s. She was brilliant, sharp-minded, disciplined, the kind of woman who always seemed emotionally composed no matter what chaos surrounded her. I loved that about her, especially because I was the opposite. Emotional, optimistic, impulsive sometimes. Together we balanced each other. Or at least we appeared to. We built a successful financial consulting business in Chicago during our 30s. Nothing flashy initially. Just long hours, client meetings, stress and sacrifice. Eventually, the business exploded. Corporate accounts, investment partnerships, private wealth management. By our 50s, we were extremely comfortable financially. We had 2 children, Andrew and Sophie. And from the outside, we probably looked like one of those polished upper-middle-class families people envy quietly. Nice house, good schools, vacation photos, holiday parties. But families are never fully visible from the outside. That's something I understand now more than ever. Andrew, our oldest, was charismatic from childhood. Athletic, confident, naturally persuasive. The kind of child teachers forgave easily because his personality was so magnetic. Sophie was quieter, more introspective, deeply empathetic. She became the emotional caretaker inside the family very early. Looking back now, I realize Eleanor treated them differently from the beginning. Not cruelly. Subtly, Andrew's mistakes were excused. Sophie's mistakes were analyzed. Andrew received support automatically. Sophie received expectations. At the time, I interpreted it as personality differences. Now I understand something darker was happening. Eleanor saw Andrew as fragile emotionally, and Sophie as resilient. Ironically, strong children often receive less protection because everyone assumes they'll survive anything. Andrew struggled financially throughout adulthood despite every advantage imaginable. Failed startups, luxury spending habits, risky investments, relationship drama, constant instability. Meanwhile, Sophie became a public school counselor. Responsible, financially careful, emotionally dependable, the type of daughter who called every Sunday without being reminded. And somehow, because Sophie handled life competently, Eleanor constantly prioritized rescuing Andrew instead. At first, the financial help seemed reasonable. Small business loans, temporary assistance, mortgage support. But over the years, the amounts quietly escalated. Tens of thousands became hundreds of thousands. Then eventually, millions, and somehow I never fully saw it happening. That realization still humiliates me. People assume betrayal requires obvious deception. It doesn't. Sometimes it simply requires one spouse handling certain financial details over many years. Eleanor managed much of our internal family accounting, trust structures, tax planning, distribution accounts. I trusted her completely. Completely. That trust became my blindness. Then Eleanor got sick. Ovarian cancer. Aggressive. By the time doctors discovered it, the prognosis already looked grim. The next 18 months became hospitals, specialists, surgeries, and fear. And despite everything, I loved her fiercely until the very end. That's what makes this story so painful. Because discovering betrayal after death creates emotional confusion impossible to describe properly. You grieve someone while simultaneously questioning whether you truly knew them at all. During Eleanor's illness, Sophie became extraordinary. Absolutely extraordinary. She traveled constantly to help us, managed appointments, cooked meals, handled insurance paperwork, held her mother's hand during chemo treatments. Meanwhile, Andrew visited inconsistently, always emotional, always overwhelmed, always somehow needing support himself, and Eleanor still protected him constantly, even dying. One evening during hospice care, Sophie quietly mentioned wanting to buy a larger home because her second child was on the way. Eleanor immediately became tense. "We have to be careful financially now," she said sharply. I remember feeling surprised by her tone. We were wealthy. Very wealthy. Helping Sophie modestly would have been easy, but Eleanor shut the conversation down instantly. That moment stayed with me afterward for reasons I didn't fully understand yet. Eleanor died during early winter. Quietly. Peacefully. At least physically. Emotionally, nothing afterward felt peaceful. The grief hit me like drowning. 41 years of marriage suddenly becoming memory. Her perfume still lingering in closets. Coffee cups still inside cabinets. Voicemails still saved on my phone. People talk about losing spouses like sadness. But honestly, it feels more like disorientation. You lose the witness to your entire life. For months after the funeral, I barely functioned emotionally. Sophie checked on me constantly. Andrew mostly disappeared again. At first, I interpreted that as grief avoidance. Eventually, I realized guilt may have played a larger role. Then came the afternoon, everything changed. I was organizing Eleanor's office because honestly, I couldn't bear looking at it untouched anymore. Inside a locked cabinet, I found files I didn't recognize. Transfer records, private trust distributions, investment movements. At first, none of it made sense. Then slowly, horrifying clarity emerged. Over 12 years, Eleanor secretly transferred over $8 million to Andrew. Not loans. Not documented inheritance advances. Quiet transfers. Shell distributions. Private account movements. Some directly during periods when Sophie struggled financially caring for sick children and paying student loans. My hands physically shook reviewing the records. I genuinely thought there had to be some misunderstanding. Then I found handwritten notes. Eleanor's notes. One line still haunts me. Sophie will survive without help. Andrew won't. I sat there staring at those words for nearly an hour. Because suddenly my entire understanding of our family changed. This wasn't financial strategy. It was emotional favoritism disguised as protection. And Sophie never knew. That realization broke me. Not financially. Morally. Because, while Sophie sacrificed endlessly for family, Andrew received rescue after rescue privately. The worst part, Eleanor repeatedly denied helping Sophie because she claimed resources were tight, while secretly moving millions. I confronted Andrew immediately. At first, he denied everything instinctively. Then came shame. Real shame. Finally, he admitted the truth. Mom always protected him. Always. Even when he failed repeatedly. Especially when he failed repeatedly. And gradually, dependence became normalized between them. He genuinely stopped questioning whether the support was fair. That's the terrifying thing about favoritism inside families. It eventually feels natural to everyone involved except the invisible child. The conversation with Sophie was one of the hardest moments of my life. I invited her over privately. At first, she assumed something happened medically. Then I showed her the documents. I will never forget her face. Not anger initially. Pain, deep ancient pain. The kind that clearly existed long before those papers appeared. Then she whispered something that shattered me completely. I always knew Mom loved him differently. Not more. Differently. Apparently, Sophie carried that understanding quietly since childhood. The canceled recitals because Andrew had emergencies. The financial support she never received. The emotional standards she constantly had to meet. All of it. And somehow, I never saw it clearly enough while Eleanor was alive. That guilt still destroys me sometimes. Because protecting children from unfairness is a parent's responsibility, and I failed at that more than I realized. For months afterward, the family nearly collapsed completely. Andrew spiraled emotionally after finally confronting his dependency honestly. Sophie withdrew emotionally from everyone, and I remained trapped between grief for my wife and anger toward her choices. That emotional contradiction nearly broke me psychologically. Because loving someone doesn't disappear simply because you discover painful truths about them. That's what people misunderstand about complicated grief. You don't stop loving the person. You simply stop understanding them fully. Eventually, Sophie agreed to family therapy reluctantly. Andrew joined later. Painfully. awkwardly. And over time, truths emerged none of us had ever discussed honestly. Eleanor grew up emotionally neglected herself. Her younger brother died during childhood. After that, her mother became obsessively protective toward fragile people and emotionally demanding toward resilient ones. Without realizing it, Eleanor repeated the exact same pattern with our children. Protect the struggling child. Depend on the strong child. Over and over. Generation after generation. Understanding that history didn't erase the damage, but it explained it. Today, our family is still healing slowly. Very slowly. Andrew finally works consistently and lives independently for the first time in his adult life. Sophie maintains stronger emotional boundaries now. Healthy boundaries. And me. I spend most mornings sitting beside Lake Michigan thinking about how easy it is for love to become distorted by fear. Before Eleanor died, she once told me, "The people we worry about most often receive the most attention, even when they deserve it least." At the time, I didn't fully understand the danger hidden inside that sentence. Now I do. Have you ever realized one child inside a family carried invisible emotional burdens, while another received endless protection? Tell me in the comments below. And if this story touched you, please like and subscribe. Because sometimes family wounds don't begin with hatred. Sometimes they begin with unequal love.